Back to the welcome, everybody. So, Candid Conversations with Women Leaders. And here today we have Adriana Lika, the co-founder of Rocket. We have Annie, founder of Wonderbricks, Joyce, head of gallery and exhibitions at Asia Society, and myself representing AQUMON as the head of corporate communications. So welcome everybody for joining us today. So just as a brief overview before we jump right into this candid conversation and natural free-flowing conversation, let's look at the statistics of what's been happening this year. First off, I hope everybody here who's joined us today might know a little bit about AQUMON. If not, we're here to empower every investor. So we're a smart investment application. And we try to make investments simpler, smarter, and more accessible through technology. And what you can do, you can try to download our app and see how you can get started with your own investment portfolio. All it takes is one click. Now, this year, AQUMON has done some fantastic women empowerment series, I would say. We've actually granted access to around about 65% of increase of female investors on our platform. And that's a 279% year-on-year growth. So what we're actually seeing is that women are getting more and more engaged with investments, which is great. This is all about financial literacy. It's about improving accessibility to women so that they can also grow their money. And certain contributors is the fact that AQUMON is a very simple, stable, transparent, and data-driven platform. So again, people with not a lot of time on their hands can come onto AQUMON and just invest with one click. So today we can look into the age ranges of our female investors as well. So sharing some data, you can see that by far, I would say 41% of our women investors actually range between the age of 30 to 39. And then another bunch, second up would be 21 to 29. And then we got the 16% from 40 to 49. Now, there are several contributing factors we feel that really led to this kind of data shown here. First off, most people actually start developing the investment mindset somewhere in their mid-20s when they come out into the society and they kind of realize, hey, I gotta think a little bit about saving up so I can move and progress towards future-looking goals. And when they really hit the age of, end of 20s, beginning of 30s, we're really looking at, family planning, marriages, saving for retirement. So these are all contributors to why suddenly there's a growth in interest in investing. All right, so great that we've shared a little bit of data with everybody. And now without further ado, we can hop onto our panel. So very excited. I think we can just do kind of like a 2-minute introduction of each of our speakers themselves. So let's just start with Adriana today.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Caroline. Hi, everybody. So really lovely to be here. And thank you for AQUMON for inviting me. I'm also a customer. So thank you for a wonderful platform. Little sales plug there. So full-time, I'm actually also the global head of retail at Bullish, but today I wanted to chat a little bit more about a startup that I co-founded a year ago called Rocket. So we're a tech platform and we essentially aim to provide a seamless discovery and booking experience for freelance instructors starting in Hong Kong, and then later we're aiming to go global. And before that, I spent a decade in digital marketing and product management, helping companies like HSBC, Swire Properties, and also DFS essentially launch and scale their digital offerings. So one of my biggest projects in Hong Kong was launching PayMe. It's kind of still one of my kind of most proud moments. And in my spare time, I teach digital marketing at HKU in PLU.
Perfect. Thank you so much for your introduction, Adriana. What about we move on to next to Annie Liang, founder of Wonderbricks.
Thanks, Caroline. Really great to be on this panel today with these great ladies. So a little bit of introduction on what I'm doing. I founded Wonderbricks. It's a construction technology startup. So we are building the world's largest smart database of building materials and offsite manufacturers to help the industry build faster and greener. So we have a team of 20 across 3 locations in Hong Kong, in China, and also New Zealand, Australia. We are mixing a team of data scientists and software engineers with people in construction and architecture to create this platform together. So it is. It has been a very exciting journey to start this company. So I was not always in construction. Before starting this company, I was actually working in finance. So I was at UBS for 6 years, and then I also founded my nonprofit in music. It was called Music for Community. And then I also worked in a real estate investment platform for a few years. And then eventually making my way into construction. So currently, I'm also completing my research master's at the HKUST as well. So it's really good to be on this panel and look forward to sharing more with you guys.
Thank you so much, Annie. It's wonderful having all these ladies and women leaders. So let's move on to Joyce, Head of Gallery and Exhibitions at Asia Society Hong Kong. Over to you, Joyce.
Thanks, Caroline. Hello to everyone and a good evening to everyone who's listening on this webinar. My name is Joyce and I head the Gallery and Exhibitions team at Asia Society Hong Kong Center here in Hong Kong. We are based in Hong Kong with a 30-year history here in the city. But this year in 2022 is actually a milestone year of our 10th anniversary being at the heritage building site we currently occupy in Admiralty, right next to the British Consulate. It is a very happy place to be, since I don't think very many people can say they go to work in a heritage building. So as caretakers and guardians of heritage and art, it's a very interesting space to work in.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Joyce. So to our lady panelists, we're going to kickstart with the first topic of today. How does your industry look at gender? So we're going to perhaps start with maybe the art industry. So we're going to go with Joyce first. Tell us a little bit about how your industry currently looks at gender.
So it's a constantly changing topic. Earlier when we were discussing this, I mentioned that from the perspective of art history, at least, we're moving away gradually from categorizing artists by their gender. So we're moving away from saying, this female artist or this female art historian had this to say. You either mention someone by name or it doesn't even factor at all. And it's a very interesting thing to see, because there's that focus on individualization and sort of de-exotifying the fact that, oh, you're a woman and you have an opinion, or it's somehow extra special that you're saying something from the perspective of, say, a female gaze. It's no longer the be all and end all to say, this is something from a female perspective. So there's gradually and more we see some sort of gender neutrality becoming more of a norm, which I personally very much welcome, so that the focus is more on the content rather than who's saying it specifically. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, this really does go to show a little bit more about like how the new narrative actually isn't about so much as, oh, I'm female and I really have to speak out loud, but rather let's not just look at gender altogether. In fact, we should just be looking at what we're creating. So moving towards this, why don't Adriana, you share a little bit more about how gender is perceived through your specific industry and how you're dealing with it with Rocket.
So I think first of all, for me, diversity has been really important throughout my career. So I'm constantly mindful of it wherever I go, whether I'm building a team or a startup, in a corporate or of my own. So with Rocket, it's a tech platform, right? So even though we're servicing freelance instructors in Hong Kong, by nature of being a tech platform, it has been actually difficult in meeting kind of a really good, let's call it, gender balance, right? Majority, over 90% of our team is guys. And it's not for a lack of trying. We've tried, honestly, our hardest in getting female applicants for the developer roles, for example. Anecdotally, we've had over 300 applicants for one of the senior development roles, and only 2 women have applied. It's it's just been so hard. And again, it's not for a lack of trying. And then on the other side, however, of the business, right, we're trying to create, again, a very diverse set of instructors that are there to service every segment of the market. So there we've managed to strike a relatively good balance. We have female instructors in almost every sport except one, which is yoga. On that side, it's been just, not that it's impossible, it's absolutely possible, they're there, it's just we have to actively go out and find them. So at the moment, if you're looking at our yoga instructors, they're still primarily female, and we're currently actually trying to do a really hard push in finding male counterparts. So these are kind of the two sides of our business where we want to do better, but on the tech side, it is very hard. I think that's my personal experience.
For sure. I think here at AQUMON, we face the same problems. Maybe it is just, certain people, certain gender fit, kind of specific roles, they're more geared towards that kind of preference. And for sure, like the engineers here, the data scientists here, most of them are male in our offices. Whereas, when it comes to the software marketing side, we have a lot more females. So perhaps over to you, Annie. I mean, especially since you come from more of well, right now it's more of a construction-based background, which is originally quite male-dominated. How are you seeing this industry?
Yeah, so I would say the industry is still very male dominated, but I guess I'm building this new technology platform, and it's sort of mixing a lot of different disciplines together. So it's not just about builders, it's also about architects, it's also about making the workflows of builders and architects more efficient. So we are using data science, we're developing software to make this possible. I would though echo what Adriana just said about how difficult it is to actually hire female staff in some of these fields, like technology or software development. There are just not that many female applicants in these fields. And I guess for startups that are just starting out with building the technology and building the product, it tends to be quite hard to achieve that gender balance in the company. So in my startup company right now, it is also very much male dominated at the moment. But I guess as we move move from building the product to more marketing the product, maybe then we will have more kind of gender diversity in the company. But I guess this goes to say about sometimes it's not so much about forcing the female percentage in certain industries, because I do believe that male and females they can be good at different things. So they all have their own, each gender has their own strengths. So for example, before starting my own company, I was working in finance. I was actually working in wealth management at UBS, and it was very female dominated. We had a lot of female leaders. A lot of great female leaders. Our CEO was female, our deputy CEO was female. All the regional market leaders were female. So in the wealth management industry, obviously it is an industry where female leaders can quickly achieve many things. Whereas in other industries, they may be more male dominated in terms of more natural career progression. So I guess my point is that it also goes to what educational exposure that kids are kind of growing up with these days as well. So for example, back in my days when I was in high school applying for college, I was advised to go towards more finance or marketing and communication, right? But I have two sisters who are, maybe they're 15 years and 10 years younger than me. So when they were applying for college, their advisors were advising them to go for computer science. So actually both of them are now in computer science. So it's a very different kind of like different generation now. And I would think that once, you know, girls in my sister's generation step out into the workforce, then by that time, I think the industry, even in like technology or you know, other more traditionally male-dominated industries would be would have more female representation.
I agree. I think we can all say that in some ways it's also about how we engage the different gender groups. I mean, I grew up in a all-female boarding school, and I went to that for 2 years. And what's incredible when you're staying in, you know, an all-female kind of community, there was no gender-specific barriers. But in terms of the education we've received and what we're good at, right, what we'd excel, as you said, it was thought of finance was a great place to go into. Nobody really ever kind of highlighted the importance that technology was going to come in, right? Or how you should actually check out maybe engineering, the computer sciences. None of that was actually placed in front of us and made accessible and made interesting enough for us to want to pick it. That's how I felt about it, at least. And it was interesting too, because I think fintech itself, right, is quite still like the voice predominantly is still quite male orientated. But what we can see is like, I think it's quite interesting that we see more and more so women going into the leadership role. And it's only like one of those steps that we're slowly coming forward into. I think I was looking at this other talk that the Women's Foundation was having as well. And they were also saying, actually, you know, the board of directors, that part, there's still a glass ceiling that women are still not as prevalent in board of directors. So what we aim to do, I guess, when we educate and talk more and open up with our experiences is to let, I guess, other females know, you know, this is it. This is a movement. Despite the gender neutrality, there still is a push so that we can educate and get more access to these roles that previously weren't kind of made known to us. So I think that's quite interesting. Now, if we move on to the next question, right, let's talk about like gender specific challenges, if any, right, or stereotypes or even barriers you guys had to overcome during your career, granted that they're all in such different industries. How about we start with Adriana?
Thank you. Caroline, I know I was going to tell you my fail story, but maybe I'll keep it for another rainy day. I'm not ready to offend anybody today. So let's just say, look, I have had a fair share of challenges, both gender-wise, or at least perceived from my perspective that they were gender-wise, right? Because obviously nobody will ever tell you that, you know, that it is because you're a female. So it's really my perceived challenge, but also because of age. So I've had quite a lot over the past 12 years. But one recent one that I think it's useful to tell just because I did find it a very positive story, both for me and the person that was involved in this scenario. So I was working, I'll just say, at a corporate. It was here in Hong Kong, and I was reporting to a wonderful manager. He really was truly wonderful, but he wasn't aware of his bias. And one of these biases, unfortunately, actually, it was quite a big blocker to my performance. And in short, what it was is after hours, after work, he would get around, and I'm sorry, I'm going to put the air quotes with my boys, as he would say, which were basically some of the other guys from the team, and they would go for drinks, right? And this would happen literally right around the corner from our office. He would never invite me, right? So a month passes, and some of the guys from the team, they're like, you know, Addie, where are you? I was like, oh, I wasn't invited. I was like, oh, that's weird. And I'm like, okay, first time, no problem. Second time, no problem. Then it became a problem when in meetings, they would say, we made a decision over drinks yesterday. I'm like, that decision affects me. Why wasn't I there? So I confronted my boss at that stage and basically said that if you're making a decision, you have to be able to invite me, but also explain why am I not there? And he was very honest and very candid. And he has kind of realized at that point his bias. He said, I didn't think that it would be perceived well. well, I said, you have two choices. You either start inviting me or you start not making decisions after hours of a drink. He started inviting me over because he did realize that it was just, he was shooting himself in the foot if I wasn't there to contribute to something that, you know, affected our performance as a team. Yeah, so I guess all it took was, I did have the guts to kind of bring it up, obviously in a positive way, that, you know, this is better for us as a team. What's the point of, like, it is weird when we have my colleagues are messaging me why I'm not there. So all in all, it was a very positive story. And for him as well, he wasn't aware of this bias. And ever since then, he actually started really being mindful. So it helped not just me, but other women on his team.
Yeah, I think it is like sometimes it is the predominantly a subconscious part or not very fully aware situation, right? I don't think people in this day and age are actually going to go out and say like, you know, I will specifically favor the male gender. It's just that it was so ingrained in their education, how they were brought up, that it just seeps into their life without them even knowing. So I guess it's actually great that we do raise these issues. It's like, I know you're not being sexist, but it'd be nice to feel inclusive. So I think that's a great story. What about Annie? Do you want to share your story of, did you actually face any stereotypes or any gender specific challenges in your career path?
To me, I guess not much or not so far.
That's great, actually.
Yeah, because I was in wealth management before, like I mentioned, it was already very empowering to females to be in that industry. So not so much there. And when I started my company, I guess I haven't experienced that knockback yet. We're still early in our journey. So maybe I'll experience them more later. But so far it's been good. For me, I think gender specific challenge in terms of like career progression, it would be more internal than external factors. So I was brought up in a very liberal family as well. So my parents they treated me like no different to how they would treat boys, I reckon, even though I'm like the oldest in the family, and I'm the oldest of 3 girls in my family. There are no boys in my family, but I think my parents treated me no different than if I were a boy. So so I guess career has always been very important, but at the same time, there are some social expectations on, like, you know, how women should balance their career and their family, or like how much they're supposed to contribute to the family, or what kind of like weighting they should place on the role of being a wife or a mother, or even a daughter, right? So I think these are kind of like more important factors that affect me instead of external factors.
And I also understand that, Annie, you have 2 children as well. I mean, obviously juggling career and being a mom as well. Like, I think that itself is also a gender specific, well, sometimes gender specific challenge. You know, did you face any expectations of how you're supposed to handle motherhood, and also right now founding your own company? I'm sure there's a lot of pressures there too.
Not so much expectations from others, more sort of like just the realistic, like the practical issue of like your time management, right? Because you only have so many hours in a day. So you have to kind of like be very organized with time and how much time you're actually spending at work and how much time you're spending with your kids and the family. And these days with working from home with under COVID is actually getting quite hard to separate, you know, the two. And you sometimes end up being so absorbed in the work that you have very little time for your family. So it's about balancing that time. But I would say that in Hong Kong, I guess we're already very lucky because in Hong Kong we get domestic help, whereas you know, in other countries that's often less feasible for many families. But in Hong Kong, it's very feasible for a lot of families with both parents working. So I think definitely the domestic help that we get in Hong Kong has helped a lot of career women flourish in Hong Kong. And that's why I think we see, a lot of women in leadership positions in Hong Kong. And this kind of like pushing for gender equality is not so much of a day-to-day topic than, say, in the US or other countries.
Yeah, it goes back to the gender neutrality that I think Joyce was talking about before. If we don't feel it, it's actually a great thing that Hong Kong is a very progressive society. So Joyce, granted that right now there is more of a gender neutrality in the arts space, did you have to overcome any challenges that were gender stereotypes or gender-based challenges to get where you are now?
Absolutely. And relation to the other two speakers, I think in the arts industry, there's this reverse issue of there being a majority of females working in the arts sector. So, I lead an all-female team, and the company itself is predominantly made up of women. And perhaps I've mentioned this before, but we are all just subject to the time in which we live in and, the decade in which we were raised and grew up in. And it just so happens that when I started my career, say more than 10 years ago, the people who could be in mentorship roles or who were more senior to me or who sat in those CEO positions were all men, without a doubt. And therefore, the people you looked up to necessarily were male. And this is not necessarily the case anymore. It's gradually being phased out as more men join the industry, as more men opt for art history or arts-related subjects as their major, and more men are interested in doing arts-related occupations. But on the whole, I still have to fight to receive applications for men, sort of in reverse to what Adriana was saying. But I'm also very wary of that because you don't want to put anyone on a pedestal or turn anyone into that token gender fulfillment in your team. Ultimately, anyone who goes out into the world with a recruitment mindset or building any sort of business, you just want the perfect person for that role, perfect person for that job. And if there's no perfect, then at least the best person for it at that time. But something to be happy about is that certain job natures and certain industries are no longer becoming so distinctly split in terms of our construction must be a job for a guy, arts must be a job for a girl. I think that's less distinctive now. People can just, with a decent education, can go off and pursue really their own interests with less stigma. In Hong Kong, perhaps a little bit slower to the game on this, but there's still improvement that we are all witnessing. So yeah, lots to be happy about.
Yeah. So I think if I could share a little bit about my experience, some of you may know that my past was more so in retail and fashion. And now obviously then we're into, fintech now. So in the fashion world, generally speaking, we do have a lot of females, but we also have a lot of males because there's so many moving parts, right? There's like merchandising, there's design, and sometimes actually some of the greatest designers are male, so that I know of, right? But it was interesting because I would join a lot of these different associations, and yet still what I do see predominantly is that males are still taking the lead in a lot of these, let's say, chamber associations, or they're more active speakers. And there's still this idea that, I think it's also an Asian culture thing, right? Sometimes you want to buddy up, get the deal, and you have to go out drinking. And women generally is seen to not have as good of an appetite to, digest the alcohol at the end of the day. So the ladies are the fairest sex. would be like, you guys don't have to come for the drinks. So that was an interesting topic. But I think if we were a more mindful society about these gender biases, obviously there's the cultural norms, but how can we make it more inclusive so that, we're not trying to ask you to abuse alcohol. I understand there's some sort of honesty of exchange when there's alcohol involved, but how do we pivot it towards a healthier mindset? I think that's something worth, discussing about. And altogether, I agree with you as well, Joyce, and also Adriana, like certain roles they're more interesting to certain genders. It's something that it's not like we're trying to push for it, but it just happens. And I think what it is important, though, is always just finding the right person for the right job.
And I also wanted to speak to Annie's point earlier about a lot of us working career women in Hong Kong, we're very privileged to be able to have the option of domestic help and the affordability of that for now. And that actually bleeds a bit into also cultural norms, and quite speaking specifically to this time of working from home, stay-at-home moms now carries a totally different meaning, because that used to be, oh, maybe they're not bringing their A game to work. But now, since everyone's working from home, it sort of levels the playing field with stay-at-home mums, and it's changed the whole concept of that. Who's the more hardworking now? And it quite directly impacts how I manage and run my teams as well, because in terms of staffing, I still receive, panicked messages from people saying, but I need to make sure my whole fridge is stocked. And I'm saying, but you have a massive, project to launch in approximately 2 days. Oh no, but my husband will expect me to do this. And so, despite all the help, Hong Kong is still predominantly a Chinese minded culture. And therefore there are still a lot of household things that sort of automatically seem to magically be expected to be completed by the women folk at home. So all the past few days of supermarket frenzy, it wasn't my male colleagues that looked scared. It was all the women, planning, strategizing how they would walk back home so that they could hit, 5 supermarkets in one go. That sort of paranoia and anxiety is quite gender imbalanced, I would say, for now. But who knows? Perhaps that's the pandemic speaking. Yeah.
You ladies have similar experiences? Any inputs on this?
I do have an input on that one. Okay. I literally just 2 hours ago was chatting to a friend about, so she's planning to have a child with her husband, and her husband does not want any help. He wants her to be managing the household. He wants her to be bringing up the kids, and essentially no helpers allowed in their household. So it's really interesting. He is European, brought up I don't think necessarily that it has, in this scenario, it's not being, they're not Chinese, they're European. I think it's just a traditional sentiment, and that kind of almost romance around the mother being the mother, that's still not, it's everywhere. It's not just Hong Kong, it's not just China. And it was interesting, like I was chatting to her, she's a modern woman, she has a business. She has a fashion retail business, right? And she's been running it for years now. And he expects her to just let it all go to bring up a family. So that's going to be one heated discussion. And it's very, very obvious that there's still this kind of value attached to being a full-time mom, and you cannot do anything else, and you cannot ask for support. So, I mean, obviously that's her battle to kind of fight, but I was just, I'm like, oh my Lord, I'm feeling very lucky that I'm not in that situation at the moment.
It's shocking, I think, like some of the more traditional mindsets, even though we have all this help available. I mean, I have friends in China who actually have 3 helpers, running the household while they're managing their, multi-billion-dollar business. And they kind of need the help. And I think, why not, if this is what you want to achieve in life? So we're going to take a little bit of a pivot because as we're talking about empowering more women and kind of increasing the education levels and also the accessibility so that more of us feel empowered to do the things we want to do. So obviously, I think an interesting topic that I want to bring up is, how do you guys think about money and investments? And because ultimately what AQUMON is trying to do is we're trying to empower, our investors so that they can achieve their dreams. So how's your relationship with money, and how do you observe females in general and their money matters? I think that would be an interesting one to explore a little bit. How about we go with Annie first with this?
I think for females with money matters in particular, I think from my own personal experience, my relationship with money started quite earlier on, because I started working part-time jobs since I was 13 years old, yeah. And I've never stopped working throughout high school and university. So I worked in cafes and retail stores and things like that. I've always very much enjoyed the process of working, getting engaged with customers, learning about how the world works, and then earning that salary and then spending that salary. I've never been very good at saving, but just enjoy this whole process of doing the work and making some money out of it. So I guess I have a daughter, and I would tell her to do the same. I think money is sort of like, it just comes with the work that you enjoy, right? So I think the most important thing is to find the work that makes you happy, and then kind of money just follows. Yeah.
Okay, thank you for your thoughts. What about you, Joyce? What do you think about money, and how yourself or your female friends, or what you observe, how do they react to money matters?
So I find Hong Kong a very interesting testing ground for this. Coming from a very I come from I like to say quite a liberal family, but when it comes to certain things, they kind of fall back into a traditionalist structure. So you don't talk about your salary, you don't talk about money that much. You occasionally talk about maybe definitely spending within your means and setting up a savings account. But by and large, I think people in Hong Kong are, this is a gross generalization, but people are split into two groups, right? You either work in finance for a living and talk about money all the time, or you don't and therefore have no confidence to talk about it at all. And, even though the majority of my career has been spent in the art world, encompassing art auction and art museums and now nonprofit work, I think I was a bit thrown in the deep end when, by and large, most of my time at an auction house was spent, memorizing prices and looking at, the constant shifting scale of a piece of artwork. Why is it more expensive 3 months ago than it was now? Why will it be more expensive 3 years on compared to now? And in a sense, perhaps, and I won't have been the first person to draw this parallel, but similar to perhaps buying stocks and, share prices. But what matters really in the end is that you applaud the Picasso and not just the price. So a little bit similar to what Annie was saying, you have to enjoy the process itself. So whatever you choose to invest in, you have to like it. You have to enjoy the process, because you're going to have to spend quite a lot of time educating yourself about it. And so for me, I can't say I, don't care about the end result, but say I take a bit of a loss, it won't hurt so much if I enjoy the investing process itself anyways. And, my other thoughts about sort of investing in general is really that in Hong Kong, there might be this presumption that if you weren't top set in mathematics, or if you weren't the quickest person to finish a AQUMON sort of after school worksheet, then you can't be good at investing. But I see that as quite a different thing altogether. I mean, just because I didn't continue with pure mathematics and didn't graduate as an econ major, doesn't mean I don't have a mind to be able to understand the concepts of it. So really, I think something could be injected into the Hong Kong educational system where, beyond arithmetic and calculus and algorithms, perhaps financial fluency as part of a citizenship class or something could be introduced, so that the concept of investing and taking care of yourself isn't seen as something to be hidden away, really.
Yeah, like some esoteric knowledge that only a few capable people can do, and
that you have to whisper
the wolves on Wall Street.
And say like, "Hey, Caroline, have you heard about this?" Shouldn't be that way.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, we'll come into that a little bit later, but I would love to hear Adriana's thoughts on this issue as well.
So I think something that Annie said kind of stuck with me. And I think you said, do something that you love and the rest will follow. Something along those lines. So it's interesting, like, I do agree with that, but I don't actually think that Hong Kong is a place where you could test out that theory. I think Hong Kong is quite unforgiving in the sense that it's obviously incredibly expensive. So there are often times where it's just not as easy to do that at all, right? And I actually do have a friend that literally is experiencing this. She wants to do something that she loves, but she cannot afford to do something that she loves or to even take the time to find that something. So every time we meet up, she works in a corporate. She unfortunately she doesn't like it. And it takes up, 80% of her time. So, and the reason why she's not just able to move on is literally just, she hasn't planned enough well ahead financially and saved enough to be able to take that leap into the unknown and be okay for 3 to 6 months in Hong Kong without having a job. So then for me, my solution, not just when I'm in Hong Kong, it's kind of been instilled in me for a while, is just to make sure that I plan ahead, I save ahead, so that I'm never stuck between deciding to be happy and being stuck in a job where I don't belong. So for me, financial freedom has always equated freedom.
Right. I can't agree with you more on this as well, because obviously, I think a lot of people actually who have been on our Money Talks talk show as well, we realized, or what I've noticed is female investors generally develop a lot later than our male counterparts. So you can see from AQUMON, I mean, it's great that we have so much more new female investors, but actually in the overall pie of it, I think males still dominate our platform by approximately 68% compared to the female investors. And why is that? There's so many women around me, smart, intelligent, capable women, and yet they are still not invested. And that's the real troubling part, right? Is it because, as Joyce says, there's this esoteric knowledge, everybody's just intimidated by talking about money, right? We love spending, all right, but we haven't thought about how do we save, or if we've started saving, we haven't thought about, inflation and how this is going to continue on. How can we, have a substantial nest egg so that we could retire off of, or to give us that financial freedom to move jobs or to do something we love. And it isn't until I think women really kickstart themselves, mid-30s, or at least for myself, it's like, I never really thought about money until I entered this job. And it was always like, subsisting from paycheck to paycheck and, maybe save 10%, maybe sometimes not, depends on my mood, right? And no planning, no financial planning whatsoever. But, I was thinking to myself, we're all intelligent women. How come I'm so terrible at managing my finances? In fact, how come my brain shuts down when I talk about finances? And I think it's really through when I'm reading news and things like that, it's so intimidating. For me, it's so intimidating. And I think that's how I view money. But ultimately, as I'm getting to learn more about finances, it's just like, it's actually not that hard to understand if someone actually took the time to explain it properly, or not, couch it in so much jargon. So I don't know if you guys have that same feeling, but I was like, yeah, for sure. Saving, great. Investing, a necessity. All right, so we're going to move on to our kind of like final question. And we're going to go back into the private lives a little bit more, right? Granted, everybody comes from such a different background, comes from different industries. I'm sure growing up, you guys have different pressures as well. Were there any gender bias pressures and like preferences from the family that came through? I mean, Annie and Joyce, you guys had a more liberal upbringing. Adriana, I guess we can categorize you as an expat, right? So what were your experiences like being female within that cultural context? Maybe we start with Joyce.
Well, just hearing Annie saying she comes from a family of 3 girls and being the eldest, I could immediately feel the pressure because I escaped it. I have an older brother who shouldered that burden. And because he was born a boy, I think all the boyish matters naturally fell his way. So I was really given all the pros and cons that a middle child would have. And so, no, I was just expected to excel at what I was doing and to be a mindful, sensible person. But had there only been, say, one of me as a single child or any other sort of family setup, I think the pressure would no doubt be greater. It's a very practical world we live in, and you have to be able to subsist and sort of rely on yourself. So, you know, now that there are more tools of transparency and more entry-level ways of being able to invest, I think are really empowering if referred in the right way. And I'm not surprised at all by your data chart that you showed, Caroline, at the beginning, where women are really only getting into the scene in their mid-30s. I think it takes time to build confidence. It takes time to build that paycheck. And it's quite natural also to feel that what's the point if I'm starting with such a small nest egg? You know, the investment returns wouldn't be that much anyways. But I think I would tell sort of my younger self or any mentees of mine that it doesn't matter if the amount is small. What matters is that you're rehearsing the game, that you're dipping your toes in and that you're getting your feet wet. So you're not caught like a deer in the headlights, you know, come 40 and you're only just starting again. So, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's for sure. I think, I guess it ties in back a little bit about, you know, certain pressures like, you know, you should get married sooner. You should find a husband who can support you, you know, so that if you have that financial empowerment, you might not actually have to fall within the norms. So I think over to you, Annie. What was it like? You said you're part of the boys. Was there any pressure like, oh, you had to get married by a certain age at all, or like you're expected to hang back a little bit more with the family because you're female? There wasn't any of that?
Actually, to be fair, not so much of that in my family. I think these days the struggle or the pressure mostly comes from society expectations that women should have it all. It would have actually been easier if women were just expected to be, you know, a good wife or a good mother. You know, it sounded much easier than what we are facing now, because nowadays girls grow up with so much empowerment and, you know, society rooting for us and saying that, you know, look, you know, you can have it all, you know, you can be a mother and you know, and also, you know, be a, you know, woman leader, and you should do it all. You have it in you to do it all. So like these days, actually, I would say girls are, you know, having a harder time to feel fulfilled. Like you constantly feel like you're not enough, right? But I think the most important thing is to really, you know, to know that, you know, whatever it is that you've chosen to focus on at your stage in life, it is enough for you, you know, at that stage, right? There should be obviously a little bit more of like, you know, be a bit more ambitious, or like, you know, feel like you can do a little bit more, but not kind of like be so pressured by the whole idea that it makes you feel stressed, right? So I think it's important to remember that these days, because nowadays I think we are getting so much encouragement from the society to do it all. Sometimes I feel it myself. I feel like, you know, I'm not doing enough as a mother. I'm not doing enough as a boss. So I think sometimes it's good to dial back a little bit and you know, say to yourself that what you're doing right now is enough. It's very enough. You know, get off work or get off your day and just go and relax. So that's what I feel.
Yeah, it's interesting how that whole dialogue has reversed on its head, and every woman's supposed to be a superwoman now. That comes with insurmountable amount of pressure. Adriana, do you feel the same way? Like, do you feel like you have to do everything? How do you keep that balance between, you know, wanting to achieve more and also, you know, having time for yourself to be okay with where you're at?
I think that question probably isn't actually gender specific.
Yeah.
I think it would apply to anybody,
no.
right?
Well, unless obviously, you know, do you feel that pressure because you have to be a superwoman, you know, you have to be good at everything you do. That's a different type of pressure from before, where you're just supposed to hang back a little bit, like from the previous generation, hang back, take care of the family.
I don't feel like I have in my personal life, and obviously I'm lucky enough I honestly don't feel any gender pressures personally. I wish I had a better answer than that. I could the first question that you asked, I could probably have a better anecdote too, which was something around the background, right?
Yeah, no worries. I mean,
family pressures.
Tell me about family pressures, if there are any, or none at all.
Okay. You know what? Here's just, I guess, sorry, not completely to do with your question, but yes, I am an expat. I have an interesting background. I grew up in Moldova. My mom is from Ukraine. My dad is from Romania. And then we immigrated to Canada. And there was only that one part in, I guess, my childhood where I didn't understand at that point that was a gender diversity, that was a gender bias or anything to do with gender, because that word didn't even exist back in the day, right? But essentially, when I was growing up in Eastern Europe, I constantly wanted to do what my two brothers were doing, which is play football. My entire family would be like, you know, they're all about football. And I just remember they were playing football, but I wasn't allowed to. So every high school I would move to, the first thing that I would do is I would go and say, do you guys have a girls team? Could I join? And the answer was always no, but here's a gymnastics team. And I remember I got really mad one day in Romania, and lucky enough that my granddad knew somebody at the school, and essentially they let me play with the boys, with the football team, but not the official game. So then when I immigrated to Canada, I always asked that same question wherever I went. I'm like, do you have a football team I could sign up to? So when I moved finally to Toronto, that was the first thing that I did in my high school. I'm like, do you have a women's team? And they said, yeah, of course. So I've been playing semi-pro since then. And I just remember it's the first time that I realized how important education was, and just why was Canada to me all of a sudden, like, it just felt like gender was not an issue at any point. It was only at that point that I realized that it was an issue back in Eastern Europe. And I do often wonder how my life would have turned out if I stayed back. So I am thankful that ever since I've moved to Canada and I've been working across Asia, it has never, obviously in a professional setting, there are certain things, but to that level where I'm completely blocked just because I am blatantly a woman, I haven't experienced that.
That's actually, you know what, I think this panel has really shared some great news about progression for women altogether in the Hong Kong society, because ultimately, you know, we're not hearing things like, oh, my career is completely obliterated because I'm a female gender, right? It's more like there's more gender neutrality. We're looking at whether or not the person can bring this right traits on the table. And also we're given a lot of support, resources, sometimes even, you know, too much support in a way that you feel burdened by being a superwoman in a sense. all good problems to have for the time being, but obviously we'll dial it back and do some self-loving too. So I think what we're going to do now, I'm mindful of the time. We do have a few Q&As coming through. Perhaps we'll just maybe choose one or two, and you guys can just give like a maybe succinct answer to that. So one of the questions we have is, what are the successful traits of becoming a woman leader? So we'll start with Annie, and then Adriana, and then Joyce.
I think so. Like I said in the beginning, I think women are good at solving different problems sometimes than men. The women leaders tend to be more communicative and sort of like more. Actually, they tend to be more logical when they're dissecting problems. To the contrary, like the stereotype is that women tend to be more emotional. But actually, if you hear a woman pitch and a man pitch, the man pitches his company like he's selling a dream, right? Like, going all out there with confidence, like he can conquer the world, and he can rile up emotions. But when a woman goes to pitch, she kind of like gets more analytical, more careful, step by step, logical. So actually, it's quite interesting how different genders the style of leadership can manifest very differently. But I think either style would have either style would have its pros and cons. And in today's generation, where there's a lot more of like multidisciplinary and employees getting younger and younger, I think the communicative style and sometimes being able to like speak in another person's perspective or like another technical domain's language actually can bring a lot of advantages.
Great, thank you for that. Adriana, what key success traits do you think is needed for a women leader?
Again, not just for women, because I really don't have a difference between a woman leader and a leader. I'm sorry. Don't say sorry. I've been told that before, but I keep on telling people, I'm like, well, I'm Canadian, so sorry is just, like using a hashtag. Anyway, my biggest item that has helped me, I hope, to be a good leader and a good team manager, and also a colleague, is to be empathetic and to try and understand what happens outside of work. I have heard before not to be as, for lack of a better word, as mindful, because it's not your business to know what's outside of your business. But actually, it really truly understands me to know when somebody is not performing at their best, there's something out there happening in the rest of their life that I could potentially help out by doing something simple. I'll give you one example because it's truly one of my favorites. Just because whenever I hire somebody, and as a team, we all know each other's favorite comfort food. I know it sounds so silly, but whenever somebody's feeling down, even for a little bit, I had this one girl in our design team and she was obsessed with chicken wings. It's her favorite food. If she ever feeling down, I would just send her a secret box of chicken wings and it would just make her day. So just knowing what makes somebody happy, even if it's something small, is incredibly valuable.
I agree with that. Joyce, perhaps some success traits of maybe not just a woman leader, but if you want to put the gender spin on it, you're welcome to too.
Yeah, just in general. I mean, I definitely don't see myself as a success just yet. On my way to building success, perhaps. But what I've learned really is that, I never take no for an answer. And that's not because I'm headstrong or particularly arrogant. I think it's just that people don't necessarily know why something's good for them, which is why they're saying no. And to make a success of yourself, you've done the thinking for someone else. So every time someone says no, I tell them 10 different ways why it should be a yes. And there's a lot of extra effort in doing that, of course, but if you're willing to persevere and spend that time and energy, it usually has its returns. So yeah.
Wow. These are all very key empowering traits. All right, last question. Someone says, I am new to investing. Any tips on that? We'll start off with Adriana.
Okay, so right now there's no silver bullet for getting started with investment. If you're a complete newbie, I would highly recommend grabbing a friend that you know is investing and get them to suggest an easy app to get started. If you don't have somebody that you know that is actively investing, I would actually recommend your bank has a relationship manager. They will absolutely give you a free educational session on how to literally like buy your first stock, make sure it's the safest thing ever. So I would recommend just what is the app you're going to use? What is the safest you can invest? Being happy, essentially being okay to potentially lose it. You need to understand the risk as well. But I would start off like literally just with that. It's buying your first stock.
Agreed on that. Annie, what about you? What tips do you have for a newbie, a complete newbie?
Because I used to work at a bank and I used to help clients invest their money. So when it comes to my own investment, I don't really, I want to find a way that is actually kind of like quite easy to invest. It doesn't require me to do the sort of like studying the markets and reading the news and reading company reports like what I used to do at work. So I would just go with like a way to kind of like just diversify my investments in a portfolio that is well balanced, and it gives me kind of stable returns year on year. So what AQUMON offers actually is great. I'm an AQUMON customer. So that would be my advice.
Thank you for that, Annie. Nice plug in there too. We did not pay her to say that, but thank you. So let's move on to Joyce. You know, how do you invest? How would you recommend a newbie getting their feet wet investing?
Start with what you know, and then branch out from there. So just like Annie was saying, if you have someone to invest on your behalf, or whether or not you're doing it yourself, it's going to require a lot of reading, a lot of looking at, company filing reports, AGM meeting notes, background checks on the company founder. And if it's, a company that deals with something that you're personally interested in already, then it's just going to make that whole due diligence process that much easier. For example, if you're, a serious athlete like Adriana, and, you play football anyways, well, if you wanted to invest in a football team, reading those reports is just going to be that much more fun. And then once you get a good grasp of that, you can move into other industries or company profiles that you have, no actual sort of mind game in beyond like a literal figurative investment.
Thank you. Thank you for the advice, ladies. Actually, I would add in my own advice here. And it's basically Nike's motto, just do it. Because if you just keep thinking, oh, I'm going to wait, you're never going to get in the pool. So part of it is just, committing to it and doing it, even if you might lose, it's at least getting started and you learn from that and you get invested and you become more, focused on it, right? Rather than being out of the game and just being a commentator and never really getting your feet wet. All right. So I think that's all we have for time. Thank you so much, ladies, for joining us today. And thank you to all our audiences out there. I hope you found this useful. I hope you found it insightful and you learned some new skill sets or, learning about different industries. I'm going to wrap up by just saying, if you guys do want to get invested, AQUMON's here for you. Feel free to follow us. We'll send you guys a follow-up email so that you get a little bit of a, head start, a bit of a discount, which is great, especially for women investors. And so thank you once again, ladies. It was such a pleasure having you.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you,
everybody.
Bye.
All right. Have a great one.
Good
Bye.
night.
Lovely speaking.
Bye.
Bye.